Hello, my name is Julie, and today I'm reviewing all the books that I read in July. June was a terrible month, or it was highs and lows. July, I was still busy, but I felt like I was a little bit more on top of things. Did I almost have a mental breakdown this month? Yes. But on the other hand, we had some great books that I'm really excited to talk to you about. Honestly, this month was like feast or famine in terms of like if I could read or not. I had some weekends where I basically was not able to touch a book, and then I had one weekend, or actually more than a weekend, where I was just on vacation reading as much as physically possible. So it balanced out to like almost average. So let's talk stats. So in July, I barely read 12 books, really pushed myself over the line for that one, for a total of 4,286 pages. Right now I have an average rating of 3.86, which if I continue to keep that rating there, which it could be lowered, I think I've been generous with like how I'm rating my 3 stars this month. It is the highest average rating I've had because I had 2 different books that I think I'm giving a 5-star. One of them I think is a pretty solid 5 stars. One of them we'll see if it stays a 5-star. Had an average page count of 357 pages per book and 138 pages per day. I only read 2 books from my collection, and I had 1 book that I have added to my TBR. For an annual net TBR shelf of -17, but like that just being -1 of last month makes me upset. So my star ratings this month, we have a whole lot of books that I'm giving in the range of a 3-star, but I had some really stellar books that I'm giving 5s. My number 1 genre was fantasy with 4 books. Then I read 3 books that were considered general fiction, 2 sci-fis, then a speculative fiction, a romance, and a nonfiction. And there's actually 1 nonfiction that I did not finish this month that I am rolling over to next month. As for series standings, I didn't do like 100% super great this month. I had 1 book that is a first book in a series. I had 1 book that is a sequel that is not a reread. I have 1 that's a reread, and the rest were standalones. For mediums, I had 5 audiobooks and 7 physical books. I had 9 authors that were new to me, which is way, way more than average. I'm usually about 50-50. I had 2 authors that I had read from before, and 1 book that, again, as I said, was a reread. So let's get to the books. The first 2 books that I read this month were for my July vlog, in which I went through all of the Hugo nominations for Best Novel for 2026, and I read all the books that I had not read already. So if you would like to see my very full thoughts on those, talking about what the Hugos are, how they're different from other fantasy awards, and looking into the history of the awards to find out which one I think will win, you should go check out that video. I did a lot of work behind the scenes on that one. But I ended up reading 2 books that I had not already read, and both of them were new to me authors that I had had my eye on for other things that they had written. So I picked up something different from them. The first of those was The Incandescent by Emily Tesh. This is an urban fantasy that is set at a magical academy in modern day. And our main character, instead of being a student, is actually a teacher at this school. So this is set in the UK. It's like boarding school that's secondary school mixed with 6th form. And there are 3 different types of magic, but the one that we mostly deal with is invocation, which is invoking demons. And our main character is the teacher who's in charge of the higher level students who are in invocation, which is the most dangerous of the types of magic. So there's not that many students. At the very beginning of the book, a very high level demon is summoned back to the school. It hasn't been there in over 20 years. And we see as the teacher is sort of having to deal with both, how do I handle my students, and also how do I handle the demon? This was a book that I was excited about. I was anticipating reading it last year, and I just didn't get around to it. So I was really happy to get to it, only to have it be so just like route 1, pared down. The thing about this book is that I think that this was originally planned to be a series, because the acts feel so different from each other, but also they do naturally feel like how you would plot out a series. But this author like already won the Hugo Award for her debut novel, so like I don't feel like she would have had pressure on her from the publisher to just do a standalone. It felt chopped up, and like there wasn't as much detail as we could have gotten about all of these things. I would have really enjoyed spending more time with her as a teacher teaching these students. Like what we did get of that, I think was great and is the standout thing of this book. At the beginning, when we're learning about like how the school is run and everything, I was really excited about that. And I was like loving how much detail we got. And then that just like kind of went away. I don't even understand why we're invoking demons in the first place. Like there doesn't seem to be like a huge purpose for doing this. The characters that I think we're supposed to like get invested in, the main student or the love interest, like we really just don't see that much And we spend way too much time with a person who is very clearly a villain that the main character is just kind of like, I'm sure he's okay. I'm sure he's fine. Of all the books that were nominated for the Hugo this year, this is the only one that I do not understand why it was nominated, other than it just being an author that has won the award before. I keep talking about how cute one element of this book was, that like the smaller demons like inhabit things that are technologically or magically involved, or like just have some sort of personification to them. So like people keep yelling at the printer because it doesn't work, and so a demon inhabits the printer and then it goes on strike. And that's like such a cute and fun little detail that I would have loved to see this school actually built out, because I think toward the end we sort of get more of a vibe of like the school as an entity that worked really well. I just think that this could have been built out so much more into something I actually enjoyed. I'm giving this in the 3.5 range, like a lot of books that I read this month, just because like it just did not stand out to me. The last book that I read for the Hugo's video was Shroud by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a standalone science fiction novel that is hard sci-fi. There's this crew, and they are assigned to assess if this moon that they call Shroud is going to be inhabitable for humans. They call it Shroud because of the impenetrable atmosphere. Like there's no light down there. On every single radio band and anything, any sort of sensor that they have, there is this constant signal going on that just keeps changing. There's no pattern to it. And they're like, what's going on? They end up sending enough probes down there to like get through the atmosphere that they finally get some footage, and they see what seems to be an alive creature. For there's some sort of disaster, some of the crew ends up crash landing on the moon, and they are going to have to try to get themselves across half of the moon, essentially, to get to this point where they could possibly get a signal out above the noise that is on Shroud. And the main selling point of this book is not actually in the synopsis. We get very short chapters occasionally that are from those aliens' point of view. I think the aliens in this book are so interesting. And the science behind like making this planet and like what these characters are having to do in order to do the things that they're trying to do, like all the engineering behind this. Very interesting. However, this book is dry. Oh, my flower fell. There we go. However, this book is dry, it is cold, it has very little personality. I would in fact say that the alien characters that we barely get perspective from have more of a distinct personality than either of the two human characters that we follow. And I understand that these characters are in a life or death situation. That doesn't excuse it. Actually, it really doesn't. If you love Andy Weir, but you want a book that has like no humor in it, no characters that you want to root for beyond just wanting them to survive, here's your book. I think it takes a pretty realistic approach to the idea of communicating with aliens, because like every book that you read has the exact same situation. So I did think that the ending of this book was the most interesting part of it, but I am not the audience for this book, and this has made me less excited to read Adrian Tchaikovsky in the future, if I will at all. If you have read the Children of Time series and you think that there are like actually standout characters versus this one, please let me know, because I don't want to be put off of a book just because of a different book. I think I had more fun with the Incandescent, but I think that this might actually be like a higher quality book. So I'm probably going to rate these about the same of Wishy-Washy. Is it 3.5? Who cares? Then I listened to The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. This is one of my most anticipated releases of last year, and I just didn't get around to it. Once it came out, I wasn't hearing a lot about it, so I didn't prioritize it, and I finally got around to it now. This book is set like 10-15 years ago in Connecticut. Our main character is Hai. He is really struggling. He is lying to his mother about what's going on in his life. She thinks he's like being sent off to college, and he isn't. And he decides that he is going to go on this bridge and take his own life. And right near this bridge is this old woman's house. And she sees him going to do that, and she yells at him like, hey, get down from there. And she like welcomes him into her house and like basically has him take care of her. So Grazina is an immigrant from Eastern Europe. She survived World War II, and she is losing herself to dementia or some similar illness, and she needs somebody to take care of her now. So Hai ends up getting a job at like a rip-off Boston market and is trying to take care of them, figuring out what he wants to do with his life, and also supporting her. Also, one of the main characters in this is his cousin, who he hasn't talked to in several years, who is autistic and obsessed with the Civil War, and his mom has recently gone to jail. And he is also working at the fake Boston market. I think it's called like Home Market or something like that. And we see all of the kooky characters who work at the fake Boston market. This book doesn't have much of a plot. It's not really trying to. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is a book that I absolutely adored, love the writing style. I think that does come over to this book, but I think it's more in fits and spurts. Like, there are moments, particularly the opening of this book is like setting the scene of this rundown town in the middle of nowhere and just like talking about the like emotion of that town. Then we're getting into regular scenes. We might have that writing style there a little bit less. We're mostly just following people who are like down on their luck. A lot of them are struggling with addiction, not having enough money to put food on the table, or dashed dreams, that sort of thing. I thought it really brought this emotion of like the failed American dream. Most of the main characters in these books are immigrants or children of immigrants. The beginning of this book I was really interested in, and I was getting along with everything. I think this book was too long. I think it lost steam, and it just kind of came to the point where it almost felt like we were doing the same scenes like over and over again. It didn't feel like we were getting anywhere. And maybe that's part of the point, but I think this book could have done the same thing, but be shorter than it is. I also expected to have more of a feeling around Hai as a main character, or more of a journey, like because he wants to be a writer and everything. I was expecting there to be a little bit more to that. Not all of our plot lines I thought had the full follow through. If I had to compare this to literally anything, I would say maybe Dig by A.S. King, because people sell drugs out of the Arby's in that book, and it's a bunch of like weirdos in a small town. There's cousins in this book too. Dig is a 5-star book for me. This was not. I would say this is like a 4-ish book. Then I read Small Boat by Vincent Delacroix. This book was put onto my radar because it was one of the books nominated for the International Booker Prize for last year's releases, so the awards were this year. This is a book that is inspired by a true story. There was a boat of refugees that was in between the maritime area of Britain and France. Their boat starts sinking near the border. They're trying to get to England. They call an emergency line to get a boat to save them when their raft pops. The woman on the phone in France is like, actually, we can't come get you. By the time we could get to you, you would be in British waters, so you need to call them. They call them, the British people won't get them, and they keep calling this French woman, and this French woman will not send help, even though there is a French boat not far away that wasn't doing anything. And out of, I think, 19 people on the boat, only 2 people survived, and they potentially died specifically because of this woman's inaction. And this book is told from the perspective of that French woman as she is being interviewed later about this. And she does not believe that she did anything wrong. She believes she is a neutral party, that she doesn't have any feelings one way or another towards these people, that she's treating them just like she would anyone else, that these people are greedy, they shouldn't be asking for our help, and that sort of thing. This book is similar to Minor Detail. Both of them are from the perspective of the villain of the story, the person who is doing harm to a group of people that they do not belong to. And it is about that person's psyche. I listened to this audiobook while going on walks through my neighborhood, and I think it'll be hard for me not to think of this book while going on that walk again. This main character has a very specific voice, and just like that opinion of like, there's no reason I should be able to help somebody, even though this is her literal job, is to help people who are in danger. She decides that she doesn't need to do her job, and then there's actually nothing wrong with it, and she's actually the victim here. She loves to put blame on like anybody who's questioning her in the room. She loves judging those people and just like loves shirking the blame away from anyone. And I think everyone in their life knows somebody like that. And it's when people like that are put into positions in which they have power or the ability to help others and they themselves are self-serving, what goes on. I think this book was really good. Honestly, this book is pretty short. I actually think it could have been shorter than that because just like I said with Emperor of Gladness, I think there was a bit of redundancy because she's just making the same argument over and over again. This book's only 122 pages and I think it could have been a little bit shorter than it was. Not to like a criminal degree, like this is not bad. I think that this is a book that would be really interesting to like write a paper about or just like study with other people. Maybe this would be a good book club book. It was really good. I ended up giving this book 4+. I don't normally love really short books. This one did really work for me. Then I did do my reread of Mockingjay for my series in which I am rereading the entire Hunger Games trilogy, which check. And I am going to be reading the prequels for the very first time. So that video is incoming. It'll be next week as of the posting of this video. So in that video that's upcoming, I am going to go through all of my thoughts while reading the book, and I will watch both movies and try to compare them both. And there are a couple things that I actually think the movies do better than the book does, which is wild. Check out that video if you want my full thoughts on a book I've already read. Then, in an unexpected turn of events, I read Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. Backstory, my sister watched the show while it was still coming out in December, and she absolutely loved it. I see it everywhere, and I wasn't really convinced to watch it until she told me she loved it and that I would love it. I loved it. I watched it again, and I didn't know that I was interested in reading the books. She has read the Shane and Ilya books, loved them, and I ended up, for her birthday, giving her the first 3 books in the series. And we were on a road trip together, and she was like, I bet you could finish that book while we are on this trip. Not only did I do that, I read this in a day. It was way more time to read that day than most other days. But yes, if you are unfamiliar with this somehow, Heated Rivalry is the second book in the Game Changers Companion Hockey Sports Romance series. This is the first book that is following Shane and Ilya. There are going to be 3 books following them, but the rest of the books are all companions. Shane and Ilya, who are loosely inspired by Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin, they are rookies at the same time. They are in teams that are playing each other all the time, and they are constantly competing for awards and recognition. 2 of them meet before they're even drafted, immediately are attracted to each other, and this book takes place over the course of 10 years as they have a love affair that it has to be secret because there are no out gay players in the fake NHL. I don't know how to rate this book because I watched the TV show before this, and the book is almost identical to the show. This is by far the most accurate adaptation I have ever seen. Like the way that we see clips before and after a hockey game in the show, those exact moments are narrated out. The dialogue is almost word for word in places. There's like one section of this book that doesn't exist in the show, and almost everything that happens in the section of the book is just moved to other places. So it was really honestly kind of weird to read the source material, but I couldn't put it down. However, I do think that the sexual content, like percentage-wise of the book, is simply too much for me. If I was not already invested in these characters, I don't know how I would have felt about this book. In the show, it felt like it was the right amount for the story, and in the book, I was just like, we don't need to hear all the details again. And I don't think I felt as much for these characters as I do in the show when I can see their performance. But is that because I am now missing the performance? I don't know. I really enjoyed my time. Unfortunately, that does mean I've started a series. Personally, I'm interested in reading the Shane and Ilya books. I've been also told that Role Model is very good, which is not one of theirs, so I might just read those and then skip the other ones. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with this series, how many of them I want to read, but I am intending to read more than just this one book. We're gonna leave this without a rating. It's good. Thumbs up. But if you wanted to read the book because it would be less spicy than the show, do not think that at all. Then on either side of reading Heated Rivalry, I read The Poet Empress by Shen Tao, which is one of my most anticipated books of the year. This is definitely my most anticipated book of the year that is by an author I've never read from before, because the reviews about this book have been absolutely glowing. and I totally understand why. I would like to say this book is published by Bramble, which is Tor's fantasy romance imprint, and I would like people to know that this is not a fantasy romance. And everybody I've heard who have actually read the book has said it is not fantasy romance. Do not go into it thinking that. This is a dark fantasy standalone. There are two different magic systems in this book. There is the magic that anyone could potentially do, which is based on writing poetry. However, women in this world are not allowed to read or write, so they have been not allowed to do magic. There is also the magic that comes from the divine right of kings, whatever it's called, that comes from the line of the emperor. So all of the sons of the emperor end up having a different magical power specific to them. It's kind of like a cutie mark. This book is so serious, and it's a dark fantasy cutie mark. Okay, back to it. Our main character is Wei, and she is the daughter of a rice farmer during a famine, and they are struggling to get by. When one of the emperor's son comes by for the New Year's celebration to give out magical blessings to everyone, he ends up saying that the second son, the heir to the throne, is essentially asking for people to be his concubines. Those girls are going to be taken care of. Hopefully they would have enough money to be able to send home if they could curry favor with the emperor. So our main character, even though she knows that this prince whose magical powers have to do with weapons and therefore is more brutal than even the other princes, she ends up putting herself in, and somehow she ends up getting chosen to be one of these concubines. Really, the heart of this story is that she realizes that she cannot let him be emperor. She has to kill him. However, he has this invincibility magic that he has cast on himself, and the only way he is going to be able to be killed is by the most powerful magic in the world, which is a poem that you can only write. You can kill someone, but only if you know them deeply to their core. So our main character is going to have to get closer to this man who is abusing her. This book is fantastic. Sometimes fantasy standalones just don't do enough for me, and this is such a full, complete story. It feels as epic as a book that is twice its size. It really does a lot for the word economy. Even though we don't actually go to too many different places in this book, there's a lot of movement. We are pushing the story forward a lot. I really enjoyed seeing how our main character is ethically challenged throughout this book, and how she is changed by her environment and the struggle that she has to maintain herself. I loved how this book is slowly telling stories about this heir to the throne, and we unravel different layers of the people who know him on a surface level and then deeper and deeper and deeper. I love the political machinations of this book, how it's really a chessboard, but also people are getting killed left and right. Literally the only thing that I think this book could have done better is I actually would have liked if the servant characters were given more personality, spending more time with them. That's it. This book is great. I would love this to be a mini-series. I think it would be so fantastic. The way that the magic is described is so cool. It's very brutal. And I think, honestly, it would bring in people who are not really interested in fantasy stuff traditionally, because, the fantasy is not complicated. And I thought that the way that this talks about power and trauma, it can't be beat. This book is great. This is going to be one of my favorite books of the year. It will be in my top 10 list. Best believe it. I don't think I can recommend this book enough, except for the fact that you definitely, if you need trigger warnings, look into it. I then listened to I, Medusa by Ayana Gray. This is an adult fantasy standalone. Again, this is about Medusa. This is a retelling of the story of Medusa. We have a little bit more fleshed out of her backstory, some stuff that is original to this book. Our main character is Medi as she goes by with her family. Her parents are two different obscure sea gods that were pre-Olympian, and she has two older sisters who are both immortal, and for some reason she's mortal. She is also portrayed in this book as a black girl. Her hair is very important to her and very important to the story, which of course makes sense with how things are going to turn out for her. The thing that's weirdest with this book is that things that would be spoilers for the book are established parts of the myth. I think my number one comment about this book is that it feels YA. This book is not marketed as YA, and I think it is because, of course, inherent to the story of Medusa is discussions around a sexual assault. and we do have things that are shown on page, but the writing style of this book is so young. My listening to the audiobook of this, where the narrator is portraying her as young, and she is young and naive in the characterization of this book. And I understand, based on the version of the story that we're telling, why we are focused on a young, naive main character. But I would say that did feel like a little bit different than what I was expecting from this book, especially it being considered adult, especially considering like the opening of the book. I was expecting her to age up throughout the story, and she didn't. I think that this is a good retelling that I would recommend people if you are interested in it. I think Medi is a character that you absolutely want good things to happen to, you're rooting for her, and when bad things happen to her, you're very sad. I think this book was a little bit more Route 1. I don't think the gods were portrayed in a particularly interesting way. When like recently I think last year I read Wearing the Lion has a very interesting way that it portrays the gods. I really appreciate the messages that this is going for. I'm not 100% sure that I agree this should be adult, because it is talking about something that should be addressed to young people, like being taken advantage of by older people who prey on you because you are young. And honestly, like when I was reading those scenes, I like just kind of didn't want to be reading them. And I think the ending of this book was interesting in that it did something a little bit different than I thought it was going to. It didn't exactly end where I thought it would. I'm not sure that this book was remarkably memorable, except I would say the way that they talked about hair in this book and how important it is to her and her sisters and their relationship and taking care of it, how it's an art. I wish we would have gotten more from the sisters. I like this book. I think I'm gonna give this like a 3.75. Enjoyed it. If somebody was looking for something like this already, I would push them towards it. It's not my favorite Greek myth retelling, but it's definitely not my least favorite. I've read some ones that I've hated. Then I read Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. I kind of bought this on a whim, and then in a video recently, I sampled 30 first chapters on my TBR for books that I didn't know very much about. And this was the book of those like bottom 30 of my TBR, the ones that I knew the least about, that I really was in love with the writing style from the beginning, and that continued on. This is about the Blue Sisters. 4 girls in the family. They have all been scattered to the winds. They all are struggling with addiction, as that is something that runs in their family and has not really been addressed. And 1 year ago, the 3rd sister in the family, Nikki, passed away. Their mother is saying that they are going to be getting rid of the apartment they had in New York City. And so the 3 other sisters eventually are convening on this apartment, figuring out what they want to do, finally addressing each other. If I had to compare this book to another book, it would be Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I think that this is definitely for Rooney fans. I am among them. I think the writing style is so emotional. Each of our 3 sisters has a lot going on in their lives that they are trying to get over. I would say like one of them has a little bit less going on than the other 2, but the other 2 characters, the oldest and the youngest, they don't get along very well, and it is partially because they have a good amount in common, and they're the most abrasive of the sisters, and so they don't get along. And seeing how all of these women are trying to deal with the things that they are not allowing themselves, or the things that they are being destructive about on purpose, I thought was really strong. There was a scene at the end of this book where one of the main characters is talking to their mother for the first time in a long time that did make me tear up. It just felt like a very solid slice of their lives as they're trying to come together and help each other out. And I really enjoyed the sister dynamics of these people that you know so deeply, but like you're always going to argue with. I thought the voice in here was very strong. I thought that the characters, even when they're doing things that you don't agree with, were really interesting. Really, really solid. I think that this is easily going to be like a 4.5 or a 5, a general fiction that I'm definitely going to be thinking about and talking about for the next while. Then I listened to Vigil by George Saunders. Unbeknownst to me, when I read this book, this is a variation on his other very popular novel, Lincoln and the Bardo. It's the same kind of concept, different people. So the Bardo is a concept in some forms of Buddhism of this almost like purgatory type state before people go on to their next life. And this is not called the Bardo in here, but we are dealing with that same situation. And the perspective character that we're following is a woman who died like 50, 60, 70 years ago when she was in her early 20s. In a sort of Christmas Carol type way, she is supposed to be a person who is supposed to comfort people when they are dying as they are going to transition into the next life. And the person who is her charge, the person she has been assigned to look after this time, is a man who is an oil tycoon who has absolutely no regret for his life, even though he knew very, very well how everything that he was doing was very bad for the planet and other people. And we see other characters who, very Christmas Carol-like, are coming to visit him on his deathbed to have different opinions about his life. Interspersed between that, we also have our main character trying to figure out who she was. I listened to the audiobook of this fully. I was so excited to love it, but I would say that there was a sound mixing problem. Because this is a full cast audiobook, there are some characters who are just way quieter than others. So if you're listening to a conversation, like one character's blowing out your ears, the other character you can barely hear when you have it at the same volume, which is really frustrating. And I was so excited to like really, really love this audiobook. But honestly, I just don't know where this book was going. I was expecting there to be more of like an answer at the end of what we wanted to do, more of a resolution with either of our main characters. And I just don't feel like I felt satisfied by this book. It started conversations. I don't know that it ended them, but I also don't think it was trying to. Obviously, this oil tycoon like is a person who is unrepentant and like does not see himself as someone who's ever done anything wrong. He thinks that people who come after him are unfair and like don't understand what he's going through. And it's like, well, you're a fucking billionaire, bro. I think that this book was really creative. It was interesting. I was just waiting for like a thing to happen or some sort of conclusion. This one just like didn't have that last piece to really, really work for me. So I'm probably going to give this like a 3.5 or so. Then I read a sequel that I have been avoiding for a while. I have not read the first book in the series since 2024. This was one of very few books that I could have read in 2025 in terms of sequels and just didn't get around to it. And there's a reason I was putting it off. And it's because I just didn't love the first book that much, and so I gave it a second try because this second book everyone loves. It's the most loved book in the series. It has like a 4.45 on Goodreads. Everyone's like, oh my god, the end of this book's crazy, all of that stuff. And that book is The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. And I, unfortunately, felt the same way about book 2 as I did about book 1. This is a Norse Viking-y inspired fantasy series. It's a trilogy. It is completed. The first book, The Shadow of the Gods, we follow these 3 perspective characters. We have Orca, we have Elvar, and we have Varg. Orca, her husband is killed and her child is kidnapped, and there's a bunch of children in the area around her who have been kidnapped, and so she goes seeking revenge and trying to get her child back. Then we have Elvar, who is the daughter of a Jarl or some other lord, and she is trying to make a name for herself aside from her family name. And then we have Varg, who was formerly a slave, and he decides to try to get in with this famous band of warriors and ends up being accepted into their ranks. And so we have all these 3 different disparate bands of characters, and they are all convening on this one area toward the end of the book that is the graveyard of the gods. And some characters in these books are tainted, or people who are descendants of the gods themselves, and those people are usually enslaved and looked down upon, and that sort of thing. This series is so action and fighting forward that there is no place for me to breathe. There's no room for me to really care about these characters. I read the first book at the same time, accidentally, as a friend of mine who had the exact same feeling as me. These characters just don't feel three-dimensional. There's nothing really going on beneath the surface, even though there's a mother who is literally looking for her own child. Like, I just didn't feel very much for them, and that continued on into this book. And this book is it's just fighting. 600 pages of fighting, and that's it. In order to have like a fight scene, I feel like you have to have enough stuff to make it feel important, to pay it off, and it just doesn't work. I had this on my bed, and Austin picked it up and flipped to some pages, and he said, oh, they're fighting. He flipped again. He said, oh, they're fighting again. they're fighting. Again, they're fighting. At the end, he's like, well, somebody's wagon just broke in some sort of explosion-y way, so I bet they're fighting again. I understand there's like the political factions of it all, that we have all these different groups who are trying to vie for power, and now we have the gods that are coming into play in this series. Sure, on paper, that would be cool, except like I don't care. I just don't care. And the fact that this book is so highly rated, I like kind of don't get it. But it would be mostly the people who really loved book one continuing on. And this is more of the same. If you loved book one, you're gonna love book two. My friend Bex actually commented on one of my videos and said, I was unsure if I want to continue on the series. If you felt the same way as me about book one, you don't need to continue on to book two. I will say the only character that I particularly cared about following in this book, who I thought like had some sort of standout quality about them, was Brecca. I would say if I had to compare this to something I read recently, it would be The Devils by Joe Abercrombie, except The Devils by Joe Abercrombie is actually funny. This book, there's like inserts of like almost these like sitcom punchlines at the end of like a fight scene or something. It just really didn't work for me and just made me feel like, why am I reading this? So I think overall I'm going to be rating that like a 3-ish star, and I am definitely not going to be finishing out the series, which the last book in the series isn't as well rated as this one, so no point anyway. So that's one series I can take off my TBR, which is awesome. And the last book that I read this month was a nonfiction called Perfect Victims by Mohammed El Kurd. This is fairly short. It's less than 300 pages, and it is very essay-like, which I have been kind of missing in some of my nonfiction that I've read recently. And this is from a Palestinian author, and it is talking about the way that people talk about Palestinians. He acknowledges this is the case with a lot of different causes, but it is talking specifically about Palestine, how in order for a person to be considered the like victim of a crime, in this case genocide, they have to be perfect, that they have to be the model victim. And in this case, it's women and children. The women and children are the ones who are believed because they are believed to be innocent, that Palestinians, particularly Palestinian men, are like not allowed to be angry about what's done to them. Every time somebody talks about anti-Zionism, they have to clarify that they don't mean anti-Semitism. Every single time a Palestinian is interviewed about Israel and Palestine, they have to say, oh, I don't support Hamas, and like all that sort of thing. All of this like assumed guilt on the people who are being killed, when the people who are doing the killing are not being held to those standards. This book did what I wanted it to do, which honestly, like so many nonfiction that I've picked up recently, my vibe going into the book was wrong, and this actually was well advertised to me. I think that this book shines a light on the way that the West wants to talk about Palestine, like the sources that they use, a lot of little details building up to this one picture in order to be respected, in order to be seen as human. We talk about humanization in this book, how like you have to humanize the Palestinian to a Western audience. The author was a person who was interviewed as a child, was told to do things for the Western media. I think he wrote a letter. And then when he was older, when they were asking for people to interview, they're like, oh, well, do you know any children? Like they specifically want to be talking to the children because like, oh, clearly they're innocent. They can't possibly have done anything wrong, when it is still wrong that this is happening to adults and men particularly, because they are considered to be violent. This book will make you angry. I think it was the right length. There's not like a very strict structure to this book. Like there's chapters and everything, but everything kind of flows into each other in a way that works, and I was not lost in the sauce. We were just slowly adding on to the idea with more and more pieces. So this book gave me a lot to think about, and I definitely would recommend it. So those are all the books that I read in July. Please let me know if you have read any of these books. What did you think? If not, let me know what you read in July. Are there any books that you would really recommend that I read? I would love to know. And if you don't have anything to say, why not leave me a sisters emoji? The girls, the little dancing girls. How about that in honor of Blue Sisters? Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, or hype it. That really helps out the video. If you'd like to find me anywhere else, you can find me at the links in the description. And if you'd like to keep watching my videos, you can hit subscribe. I'd really love to have you around. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.